Think being Egyptian royalty meant lounging around in golden chairs, sipping wine, and waving at peasants from your balcony? Not quite. The truth is, life as a pharaoh was far from a never-ending spa day. Sure, they had more luxury than anyone else in the ancient world, but they also had crushing responsibilities, dangerous enemies, and even family members plotting behind the palace walls. In other words, being royalty in Egypt was like living in the world's fanciest prison, plenty of perks, but no escape. Today, we're peeling back the layers of what it was really like to rule the land of the Nile, from bizarre morning routines and golden wigs, to over-the-top banquets and secret conspiracies that could end with a royal's sudden disappearance. So, would you really want to live like a pharaoh? Stick around, because what you're about to hear might change how you picture the good life of ancient royalty. The morning routine of a pharaoh. For Egyptian royals, mornings were anything but private. Servants handled everything: bathing oils, perfumes, turning daily hygiene into a full-blown ritual. But no, deodorant around, incense and strong scents kept the divine image intact. Next came the makeover. Wigs were less about fashion and more about power, sometimes laced with gold or silver, impressive but sweltering in Egypt's heat. Even queens strapped on fake beards, since facial hair signaled divinity. By the end, pharaohs didn't just look royal, they looked godlike. Which was the point. Before facing the grind of ruling Egypt, they had to embody the divine. A pharaoh's daily grind. Being a pharaoh wasn't all golden sandals and lounging. Once the glam squad finished, the real work began. Pharaohs were CEOs, priests, politicians, and judges rolled into one. Mornings started with non-stop briefings on taxes, temples, and state affairs. No skipping, no sick days. Diodorus claimed their schedules were fixed by law, down to meals, though historians doubt it was that strict. Still, pharaohs carried endless duties: judging disputes, leading ceremonies, approving laws, and keeping the empire afloat, all while projecting divine perfection. And outside the palace, the grind only got flashier. Pharaohs didn't stroll, they made an entrance, traveling like a rock star. When a pharaoh stepped out of the palace, it wasn't a casual stroll, it was a full-blown spectacle. Forget cars, forget chariots. The ride of choice was the sedan chair, a throne with poles carried on the shoulders of servants. Basically, the ancient Egyptian Uber, but with more back pain for the drivers. And because being royalty meant never breaking a sweat, pharaohs had their own version of air conditioning: fan bearers. These weren't just random servants waving palm fronds. Being a royal fan bearer was actually an honorable position. Some historians even suggest they doubled as bodyguards, which means their job description was keep the pharaoh cool and punch anyone who gets too close. Picture it, the most powerful person in Egypt, gliding through the streets on a golden chair, shaded by giant fans, while crowds gathered just to catch a glimpse. Talk about an entrance. If Instagram had existed, that alone would have gone viral. But the real reason pharaohs traveled in such style wasn't just to look good, it was to remind everyone who was boss. Every appearance was political theater. And when the parades ended, the gods themselves demanded attention, because pharaohs weren't just kings or queens. They were divine. Religion, pharaohs as living gods. Being pharaoh wasn't just about ruling people, it was about ruling on behalf of the gods. In fact, the pharaoh wasn't seen as fully human at all. They were considered a living bridge between the divine and the mortal world, which sounds impressive until you realize it came with a mountain of religious obligations. Every day, the pharaoh was expected to uphold Ma'at, the balance of the universe. That meant attending temple rituals, blessing ceremonies, and sometimes making sacrifices. But here's the twist: a lot of the time, they didn't even need to be there in person. Instead, statues of the pharaoh were placed in temples to stand in for them. Imagine skipping a boring meeting and sending a cardboard cutout of yourself. Except in Egypt, it was divine authority. Pharaohs also had the job of commissioning new temples and religious monuments. They weren't just for worship, they were political statements carved in stone. Building a massive temple wasn't just saying, "I'm holy." It was saying, "I'm so powerful I can build a literal skyscraper in the desert." So while the average Egyptian prayed at shrines, the pharaoh's day revolved around proving to everyone that the gods were on their side. But divine or not, royals still had very human appetites, and when it came to food, their tables were as extravagant as their temples. Banquets and excess. Now, let's talk about the fun part, food. While common Egyptians lived on bread, beer, and the occasional fish, the pharaoh's diet was a whole other universe. Think banquet stacked with roasted goose, beef, fresh figs, dates, honey cakes, and endless jugs of wine. Basically, if it was rare, rich, or ridiculously hard to get, it was on the royal menu. And wine wasn't just a drink, it was a status symbol. Most Egyptians couldn't dream of sipping it, but pharaohs? They practically turned it into an Olympic sport. Forget hydration. Their version of water was vintage red from the royal cellar. Of course, living large had its downsides. Archaeologists studying royal mummies have found evidence of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. Turns out, unlimited goose feasts and honey desserts will do that to you. Imagine strutting around as a living god, but you're winded after climbing a temple staircase. Not exactly divine fitness. Still, food wasn't just about indulgence, it was about power. The bigger the feast, the more it reminded everyone that the pharaoh's wealth was limitless. But while banquets were luxurious, family life inside the palace, that was a lot less glamorous and a whole lot more complicated. Family life and drama. Palace life wasn't just luxury, it was chaos. While most Egyptians had one spouse, pharaohs had options: a great royal wife, plus lesser wives, concubines, and harems. The bigger the harem, the more powerful you looked. Ramses II even fathered over 100 kids, basically a walking population boom. But family wasn't all parades and playdates. Power struggles often turned bloody. Ramses III was taken out in a conspiracy led by one of his wives, while Cleopatra famously battled her own brother, who also happened to be her husband. Yet ancient family dinners were tense. In short, behind the palace walls, the real danger wasn't invading armies, it was your own relatives. Leisure and dangerous games. When pharaohs wanted to relax, they didn't play board games, they hunted lions. Of course, it wasn't always as heroic as it looked. Animals were sometimes pre-caught and released so the pharaoh could land the kill. Think of it as ancient cheat codes. But these hunts weren't just for fun. They were staged to prove the king's strength and his power over nature itself. Slaying a lion or even an ostrich wasn't dinner prep, it was propaganda. King Tut himself was shown returning from an ostrich hunt, reminding everyone that even young royals could flex divine strength. So while commoners farmed or fished, pharaohs turned hunting into a royal performance of power. The cost of royalty, health, and genetics. For all their golden thrones, pharaohs were surprisingly unhealthy. Inbreeding to preserve bloodlines left many royals with genetic issues. King Tut, for example, had a clubfoot and likely walked with a limp. Add to that the feasting, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Endless roasts, honey cakes, and wine meant clogged arteries, obesity, and diabetes were common. Studies of mummies confirm it. The supposed living gods were battling very human health problems. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most powerful queens, is thought to have been obese and diabetic by the end of her reign. So while statues showed them as flawless, in reality many royals were struggling just to stay on their feet. Divine? Maybe, but immortal? Not even close. So, what was life as an Egyptian royal really like? On the outside, pure luxury. Golden wigs, endless banquets, fan-bearers keeping you cool, and a nation calling you divine. But beneath the glitter was non-stop work, family betrayals, failing health, and the constant pressure of being half human, half god. Pharaohs lived in palaces? Yes, but they also lived in cages made of gold. So here's the real question. Would you trade your freedom for luxury, power, and divine status, knowing the cost could be your health, your peace, or even your life? Let me know in the comments. I have a feeling not everyone would say yes.